Good morning and a warm welcome to our guests. And I'd like to welcome those who are joining us on Zoom. My son asked me, why are you wearing a lid today, Mum? So this is my lid, my flying saucer. It does require quite a bit of skill to walk around the room with something like this on your head. But can I just say how absolutely fantastic you all look. The hats are utterly amazing, and I think you should give yourselves a round of applause for these fantastic hats. We asked you to wear a hat for a little bit of fun. We just felt it was a way to celebrate spring. It's a time of renewal, new beginnings, spring flowers, and although the weather today is trying to be spring-like, it's a feeling that winter is behind us and we're heading now towards summer. So this is very cheering, and I really appreciate all the effort that you have gone to. This morning, I appointed 3 impartial judges, 3 new members from 2022, and they're sitting at the front here, namely Anne, Lee, and Emma, who very kindly agreed to be our hat judges. So for a bit of fun, we thought we'd award a prize for what they considered to be the best hat, which they have done. However, we wanted to make an honourable mention of 2 who we thought had done a tremendous effort. So can I first of all mention an honourable mention goes to Antoinette, in charge of our bookstall. Stand up, Antoinette, so we can see this. Yay! Would you like to come to the front so we can all admire this? Now, Antoinette is a volunteer at Kirstenbosch, and so her hat is based on the beauty of Kirstenbosch Gardens. So, excellent. Well done, Antoinette. Okay. Our second honourable mention, thank you, Antoinette, lovely. Our second, stay here. We need a photo call for Hello Magazine. Our second honourable mention goes to Daleen Morris. Here she is. Now, she was given an honourable mention by the judges because they felt it was one of the prettiest hats, a very natural looking hat with matching shoes that have also got flowers. So, so well done. Thank you very much. Thank you, Daleen. Okay. So mine have got Antoinette's pointed out her shoes have got diamonds on them. So, okay, right. Now, the moment you've all been waiting for. The judges chose this hat because they thought it was beautiful, it was out there, it was fresh, it had fresh jasmine on it. So it had the scent of a garden as well as the look of the garden. So Jane, would you help me with the flowers? Can I call up Lindsay Khan, who is our winner? Well done, Lindsay. It has a spring jasmine flowing from the brim. So, so we're giving Lindsay the prize. And flowers on the shoes, yes. Okay. Elena's going to... Oh, hang on, the jasmine's coming adrift. Sorry. Jane will do some rearranging. Jane will rearrange it. Okay, can we have the 3 ladies together with a... Are you all right, Lindsay? Okay, stand in the middle. Elena's just going to do a quick photo call. Fabulous. Fabulous. Thank you very much, ladies. Thank you. Just wanted to mention something. This morning we won't be introducing any new members, so we may have just a little bit of time at the end of the meeting. And I notice a lot of you have been very busy visiting the philanthropy desk and the bookstall and so on. And we want you to keep buying those tickets for our 1 in 4 fantastic draw. So when the meeting is over, the desk will stay open. So if you haven't yet bought your tickets or handed in your tickets or paid, whatever you need to do, they will be there for some time time after the meeting is ended. And Eve, why aren't you wearing your hat? Look at this hat, ladies. Look at this. There she is. Fantastic. Underneath all that is Eve, who's ready to take. Brilliant. So the philanthropy desk will be open. Please go and buy your tickets. And the bookstore will also be open, and Antoinette would love to sell you some books. Okay. So as I said, today we're celebrating the first day of spring. It brings new beginnings, a fresh start, a feeling of renewal. And I think the arrival of, as I said, the spring flowers lifts our spirits and reminds us summer's not far away. So it's very appropriate this morning that our lovely speaker is actually going to be talking to us about a famous garden, but more of that later. Now on to a few club matters that I'll quickly run through. At this time of year, we ask you now to nominate people to serve on the board for 2023. So please do take a moment to consider nominating somebody, or better still, step forward to be part of the board next year. Your club needs you. I have got some nomination forms with me today. So if you would like to take one, please come and see me at the end of the meeting, and I'll happily give you a form. They were also in our newsletter, I think, last month, so they should be on the website. But please come and see me if you'd like a nomination form. I just want to mention that our membership chair, Julia Haldane, is recovering after having surgery on her leg following a serious fracture. We wish her a speedy recovery, but for the moment, she has had to step down from her board responsibilities. So I'm very grateful, therefore, to Marcella Solis, who has very kindly stepped into the breach and taken on the membership chair responsibilities. Thank you, Marcella, for doing that. Thank you. Marcella did actually carry out this role some 2 years ago, and so she's very experienced in this job, and it's wonderful that you've given us your kind help. Thank you. Behind the scenes, the Constitution Committee has completed the draft of the new amended Constitution, and this has actually been uploaded to our website for members to read. We have also included a short summary in last month's newsletter listing those items which we felt needed attention and our suggested changes. But to ensure that all the members have a chance to comment or raise any concerns that they may have about these changes, I have arranged a question and answer session on Monday, the 26th of September at 10:30 here at Kelvin Grove. The Constitution Committee, together with the legal firm Bowmans, who have kindly offered their assistance to us free of charge, will be present, and some board members, and we will be happy to answer any queries you have. We're doing this so that so that we do not have to take up too much of your time at the AGM in October on this matter, and by then we will be asking for the new constitution to be formally approved. So please make note of that date, the 26th of September. It is also mentioned in this month's newsletter. Yet again this month, we have a very full calendar. I am very pleased to see that our new supper club has been launched in September, which is being led by the lady in the spectacular hat over there, Eve. And our book clubs are up and running. Simi also has coincidentally arranged a visit to a hat making factory this month, so that's rather appropriate, isn't it? But Janet will be talking to you about groups in just a few minutes. Our fundraising project, the 1 in 4 fantastic draw, is really gathering momentum this month. We are still very happy to receive prizes during September, and they are still coming in. If you are a member of our Facebook group, and if not, why not, you will see the posts showing some of the wonderful prizes that are available. We have featured photographs and information on all the prizes. Ticket sales have been very brisk this morning, and Margie will be talking about that in a moment. But I would like to extend my personal thanks to all those who've been helping behind the scenes with this project, and all those who have sourced and donated the fabulous prizes. They're still busy beavering away at the desk over there at the moment. But thank you for all the help that you've given to this. And then we're going to, as you know, do the draw next month, which will be rather exciting. So that's enough from me and my hat. I'm going to elegantly step off the stage and I'm going to ask Janet to come forward and talk to us about the groups and the activities. Thank you.
Good morning, dear members. Thank you, Christine. Well, spring is in the air and we are getting close to completing the IWC activities for this year. We have just 3 months before we are having a break until February 2023. Please don't hesitate and book your favorite activity at our groups with our areas reps. Be in touch with them because they are organizing lunches and coffee mornings around the city. I will show you a photo collage from the area's meetings. Thank you, dear Anwar, for helping me. Can we see the collage? You will see some of the members in the areas. We have here Landudno, Atlantic Seaboard, Southern Peninsula 1, Constantia, and Boland. You will see more next month, I promise you. Well, for this month, Christine and I, we are planning a meeting with the area reps here at Kelvin. Tomorrow, thank you, Geraldine Berry, for the invitation. We are going to the Chardonnay Deli in Constantia for the Southern Suburbs 1. And now, let's have a look at the September activities. Can we see the collage number 1, please? Well, the hiking and walking group is going to the Swicker-Bossy contour path. Claudia Roca will take you to the Friday lunch at the Blaufish restaurant at the Blaubear Strand. And as always, as every month, the movie club is at the Labia. Please send a message to Barbara to book your place. The wine appreciation is going to the Dimmersdal Farm Eatery. Very nice. Zumba, the Zumba group is waiting for you. We have 2 classes in September. And as you see, Tori Elshoff is having the tennis group. Here you can see with Louisiane, they look like the Wimbledon players, yes. And as Christine said, the Supper Club is having the very first outing at La Perla in Sea Point. So please book your place. And at the second graphic from the activities in September, let me tell you the German conversation group is having a meeting again. And the Sunday lunch is going to Musenberg. Vamos a México, a la fiesta mexicana at the Tortuga local restaurant. That means the crazy turtle. It's please don't forget to ask for your mango margaritas. And Wendy will take us to the one and only for the Hotel Confidential. Margaret Abbott, our speaker today, is preparing a very special activity for a private garden at in Wellington. She will organize a transport. Don't hesitate. Send her a message. Mayon is waiting for all beginners. Send a message to Mel Roberts. Mel, where are you? Beginners are always welcome. They are meeting here at Kelvin. Maureen, you see the picture with Maureen and the group of the conversations. They are meeting also here at Kelvin. Tourists Around Town with Marianne Lovell is organizing a very nice activity at the Saturday, September 10 to the West Coast Fossil Park. Partners and friends are welcome. Please send a message to Marianne Lovell. And we see in the graphic number 3, the Jazz Club. The Jazz Club is planning another activity for the Jazz Club at Kirstenbosch. Send Elena a message because you need to buy your ticket now. Otherwise, they will be sold out with Gregory Porter, a concert in Kirstenbosch. And the Italian conversation is meeting again and the Spanish conversation. And Wendy Coetzee for the Coffee Around Cape Town will take you to a special, very special coffee, the Strangers Club. And Simi is back with the Do One Yourself, as Christine said, the factory hat. Please send a message to Simi. Good. If we have a quick look to the calendar, can we see the calendar? Arnold, thank you. You will see all the activities. You are in time to book your place. For September, we are not having the international cuisine, and we are not having the art and design. But because our group leaders, Liliana Carter and Geraldine Jacobs, they are traveling to Europe. Have a good trip, and they will be back soon. Liliana in October and Geraldine in November. And because you asked, we have two new groups, the Supper Club with Eve Levinson and the Book Club. Please, if you have interest to be part of this new group, send a message to Eve Levinson and to Maureen Collins. Enjoy all these activities. These are prepared just for you. Well, I have enjoyed very much being a member of the IWC during the last months. Thank you, dear group leaders. Thank you, area reps, for all your work, because you are the heart of the IWC. And I would like to share with you a phrase that Dottie von Ulmenstein tell us in the last appreciation group, the one appreciation group. Do you know Dottie? Here is Dottie. Dottie said, every time you attend the IWC group outings, you met new people and you are making new friends. Yes, Dottie, you are right. Dottie is our group leader from the German conversation, and she will be the next host for the One Dish Club. Well, thank you very much. See you at the outings, my dear friends. And now I would like to introduce you, Margie Vicks, our philanthropic chair. Thank you, Margie.
Well, it's Happy Spring Day from me and from Mary, our philanthropy bear. I would have loved to try those on and, show them off myself. However, they don't fit. I couldn't even try, but I will explain them to you a little later. On the 19th of August, I attended Marianne Lowell's excellent Tourist Around Town Truth to Power exhibition at the Tutu Foundation in town. And towards the end of the tour, we were invited to take a card with a quote on it. And the one I selected is by the Dalai Lama. I selected this one as it could have been written by one of the founders of the IWC, and it reads, one individual, no matter how powerful, how clever, cannot survive without other human beings. So the best way to fulfill your wishes, to reach your goals, is to help others, to make more friends. Philanthropy really is a two-way street. And I must say that we certainly know that at the IWC. For those of you who are new to our organization, you will realize that we do amazing work in the community of Cape Town. And our members are always contributing. Our selected charity for this month are the Gardens of Abalimbi and Feed the Kaelisha in Kaelicha. These old gogos, the grandmothers and the young men, do the most amazing work producing food in sandy soils in the Cape Flats. Thank you to the ladies who have brought along gardening materials for them, and to those who have donated funds for this purpose into our account and into the collection box. I was just talking to Lindsay the one who has the fabulous hat, who was manning our donations box and our collections this morning. And she said mountains of money were put into our box this morning. So thank you very much. I'd also like to thank our Red Hat ladies who have been running the raffle, and the proceeds of the raffle will also be going towards, it will actually go to a compost fund, because one of the things that they desperately need is compost, because of the quality of the soil is so poor that they need compost for their gardens. We've also been given 2 20-meter hose pipes with fittings and a spade and a hand rake. And they're on their way to me with Take a Lot. And these have been donated by a member who's currently in Europe, and I'm very grateful for that. And I must also mention a huge donation from Caroline Simpkins, which is earmarked for the young men who are helping the grandmothers. And that's really great, because these old ladies sometimes find it quite difficult and they need help. So thank you very much, Caroline. It's very much appreciated. All your donations will be very much appreciated. And I must say that Margaret Abbott, who will be talking to us later, she was the one who led us to meet with the old Gogos and the young men. So those of us who came along on that tour know exactly how welcome all these donations will be. Last month, our charity was TLC. You donated tins of food, funds, and warm clothes and blankets. These funds were used to purchase toiletries for 19 students in training at TLC, as well as more food. And this allowed me to make up parcels of 30 equal parcels, so that the people that we met each received 6 tins, equal parcels with 6 tins each. And I must thank Lindsay Khan, Yanni Humphreys, Mel Roberts and her daughter, who came along to hand over these goods. It really was heartwarming to see the gratitude from the students, and especially from the 30 needy people who stand in line to receive a plate of food from TLC on a regular basis. We've received a lovely letter from TLC, which we will endeavour to put in the next newsletter. We also received a letter from Animal Welfare to thank us for books that were donated, and in particular books that were donated by Anne Toda, and I will see if we can put that into the newsletter as well. Next month, our charitable endeavours will be twofold. One will be supporting the Princess Project, and the other will be Women for Africa. The Princess Project collect dance dresses and accessories and smart clothes for young men. This allows them to offer outfits to young matriculants who cannot afford clothes to attend their matric farewells. Now, the matric farewell is somewhat of a rite of passage in this country. It is important that young adults have the opportunity to attend these events. So members are being asked to dig deep into their trunks, to their wardrobes, into the boxes that are in your garages or wherever you keep the things that you no longer wear, and to bring out your beautiful things that you don't need, and to bring them along to the October meeting. We'll have some rails up where we'll be putting them, and from there, they'll be taken immediately, because the ladies from the Princess Projects will be collecting them straight from the meeting. I've already received, I must say, quite a lot of beautiful garments. And these two in front of me are just 2 of the garments that I've received from Elizabeth Hanley and Anne Toda. They're just examples of, I must tell you, probably I've received about 20 beautiful dresses. I mean, the most exquisite beaded and lovely handbags and shoes. Both of them were cleaning out, and in one case, Anne was moving, and so I was just lucky to be able to receive these beautiful outfits, and I've just brought two of them along today to show you. And if you don't have an appropriate donation of something beautiful for the Princess Project, we're also collecting funds which will go towards a bursary to send a previously disadvantaged woman to the Women Within Weekend workshop in November. This is run by Women for Africa, and it allows all women who attend to work through issues and traumas in their lives. Some of the members have asked me about the end of year charities, because you may remember that every year we have some charities to which we make sizable donations. I want to remind you that during the month of October, you'll be receiving a form and you'll be able to vote on the charities that you wish to support for those end of year donations. Now, on the 1 in 4 fantastic draw, first of all, I must thank Mel, who has handled the ticket sales with such aplomb. She's really been amazing. You know, we need to keep very careful records of each ticket that is sold, where it goes to, whether the funds have come in, and Mel has been amazing. So thank you, Mel. I'd also like to thank, in her absence, Linda, who has kept a record of and is actually housing at the moment at her home all the prizes that you have so kindly donated. She's in Turkey at the moment, but the minute she gets back, she'll be taking over that responsibility again, because we then have to have all the prizes here for the next meeting. No, 60 of the prizes here for the next meeting, so that you can collect them once you win them. And she has documented each prize, made sure that we know the value of it, and also she was keeping a record of those for us. So she's done a fabulous job. And the great thing about this is that both of these ladies have been inducted into the organization this year, so they're new members, so it's amazing. And now we are nearing the end of this project with only 1 month to go before the draw. We're doing the draw at the next meeting. And if you have ticket stubs with you, please hand them in to the table. Mel's waiting for them. And pay for them with either an EFT or with your name as reference, by cash at the table, or by credit card. Susan's got the Yoko machine with her, and we'll be ticking off your name so we'll know that you've done so. We'll be continuing to collect prizes up until, and selling tickets up until the 1st of October. So not up until the next meeting, but up until the 1st of October. And the reason for this is that that's the end of our financial year. So we need to tidy things up before then. So then people are going to wonder, now how's this all going to work at the next meeting? Only the first prize winner will actually physically come up and fetch their prize. So we won't spend hours with people coming up to fetch their prizes. The first 60 prizes will be lined up there. We'll announce the first 60 prizes during the meeting, but you'll collect your prizes with your ticket stub after the meeting. So that's how the system's going to work. And that is also in the newsletter, so you'll know how the system works, and I will explain that again. If you don't have a ticket with you, you cannot collect your prize. I'm just going to say that again. If you don't have your ticket with you, you cannot collect your prize. And we'll draw the first 60 prizes during the meeting, and the rest of the prizes will be drawn here in public after the meeting, because we don't want to bore the members who don't want to stay for the rest of the draw, so they can go home once the meeting's over. And the other thing to mention is that our speaker will speak before we start to draw the prizes, so that people who don't want to stay for the prize draw don't have to do so. And then also just to mention that you can continue to collect your prizes at the AGM and at the November meeting. But after the 10th of December, some people would have made an arrangement with me to collect their prizes after that, because they're away, because they're ill. They would have sent me a mail to say, please, can you hang on to my prize? I'll pick it up from you. They'll be sitting in my garage, so you can drive into my garage and pick them up. But after the December, the prizes not collected will be deemed to have been donated to the IWC. We had to have a cutoff because otherwise it would go on forever. And next year's board actually need to start with a clean slate. With all that admin completed, I'm handing over to Jane.
Good morning from me. Happy spring day. The view from here is amazing. You all look beautiful. I'm very happy to introduce Margaret Abbott, our speaker. She's very well known. She's our own RWC member. For those of you, the new ladies, the guests, I'm going to do a little bio of Margaret. Some of you that know her might not know her background. So I'm just going to read a short bio before she comes up and gives us her exciting talk. Margaret Abbott is originally from America, retired to Komaki in 2015 with her husband after living in the UK for 26 years. Originally from New England and the state of New Hampshire, she lived in Atlanta, Georgia for almost 20 years, working for the Coca-Cola Company, where she was the executive director of the Coca-Cola Foundation and responsible for the company's philanthropy. She and Jeff moved to Britain in 1989, where she became the Director of Development of the American School in London. She then started her own educational fundraising consultancy practice, ASK Associates, focusing on the independent school sector for 20 years, working with many of the great public schools in the UK. Margaret joined the RWC in 2016 and thus began her garden adventures as the garden group leader, having now organized over 50 garden visits. During lockdown, she started sharing her love for gardens and international travel with the RWC on Zoom so members could see and enjoy beautiful gardens around the world. I just want to pause there and say that one of our members at the Woodside, Felicity Axton, had said that Margaret Abbott had got her through a very, very difficult time being locked down at the Woodside. And basically that's what she looked forward to, your Zoom meetings. So she's one of our members at the Woodside and isn't able to come out due to her doctor's orders. This has now developed into a new career as she is now presenting to garden clubs and organizations in South Africa, the UK, and the States. All fees are donated to a small elementary school her and her husband are involved in, and has been set up to provide education to children of undocumented workers in the township of Masipumalele. She recently presented 5 of her garden-tainment lectures at the UCT 2022 Summer School. She will again be lecturing at the 2023 Summer School with 3 new lectures in January. Margaret Abbott.
So good morning, everyone. I clearly am in another garden because all I can see are flowers, feathers, greenery. It's a wonderful sight. I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to take you on another garden tour, but this time you can see it sitting down. And it is one of the garden-tainment lectures that I developed, really, as Jane said, very much thanks to all of you. If it weren't for this club and the garden group tours, I would never have gone online during COVID. And the first one I gave, which I had a ball doing, someone said, well, what's the next one? And I thought, well, geez, I don't think I have a next one. And 6 lectures later, there I was in front of an audience at the UCT Summer School. And I have all of you to thank for that. It's created a completely new career in the last stage of my professional life, which I really thought was over in 2015. So I'm extremely grateful to all of you for your enthusiasm and your participation, because it all started here. And as Jane said, all the fees are donated to this small school. And since Jeff and I started really on the back of the garden lectures, we've now raised over 350,000 Rand for this school. Thank you. So I'm going to be talking today about a garden that I think many of you have been to. Who has visited Sissinghurst? Really quite a few. We're going to be talking today about the loves, the legacy, and the life of Vita Sackville West and the garden that she created with her husband, Nigel. If this lecture were a movie, it would be X-rated. because of adult themes and adult activity. But with as so many fabulous gardens and delightful gardens, it is their creator who is sometimes far more interesting than the garden itself. And for me, this is true of Vita Sackville West. In today's world of increasing gender fluidity, much of it bewildering to older people, and that could be us, Vita would not be out of place. Indeed, she wouldn't be considered out of the ordinary at all. And yet this Edwardian woman was certainly extraordinary, and for many reasons. So thank you very much for joining me. Anyone who has been on a garden tour of England will have invariably visited Sissinghurst. It's a magical creation of poet and writer Vita Sackville West and her husband, Harold Nicholson, author and diplomat, who moved there in 1930. This lecture is really their story, and particularly Vita's. And it's a trip not only to this glorious part of Kent, but to a fascinating time in history when people lived and possibly behaved differently. Located in Kent, Sissinghurst is among the most famous gardens in England and is designated Grade 1 on Historic England's Register of Historic Parks and Gardens. Vita was a poet and a novelist in the early 20th century and a member of the Bohemian Bloomsbury set in the 1920s. Today, she is better known for her garden than for her love affair with Virginia Woolf, but I'm getting ahead of myself. In the lovely 5 acres of gardens, what you will see at Sissinghurst is a series of enclosed spaces or garden rooms, each styled and planted in a different way, but all giving an overwhelming impression of abundance and romanticism. Rare plants mingle with traditional English cottage garden flowers. Sissinghurst opened to the public in 1938. And today, about 200,000 people visit each year. When Harold and Vita bought Sissinghurst in 1930, they had been married for 17 years. They first met in 1910 and married in 1913, apparently never having shared even a kiss during their long, undemonstrative engagement. At no point during their courtship would he excite Vita physically. Afterwards, Vita stated that it was Harold's own fault. He was far too over-respectful. His behavior convinced her, correctly in the event, that he was not the lover boy type of a man. Their marriage has been described as unconventional, which is putting it mildly. It's also been described as notorious, which is probably closer to the truth. They shared a deep level of intimacy and mutual understanding, and usually presented a united front to the public eye. She had with her husband what we would nowadays call an open marriage. Both were bisexual and had many affairs during their married life with members of the same sex. Let me remind you that in the early 1900s, homosexuality was a crime in Britain and would remain so until 1967, the year I graduated from high school, when homosexual acts in England and Wales were legalized on the condition that they were consensual, in private, and between 2 men who had attained the age of 21. As a matter of interest, lesbianism has never been outlawed in the United Kingdom, some believing that this stemmed from Queen Victoria's belief that 2 women couldn't possibly have sex together because it would be a physical impossibility. Now, there is some dispute about all of this, but it makes for very interesting reading and research. Harold and Vita remained devoted to each other throughout their lives, Harold dying at age 82, 6 years after Vita in 1968. In Vita's own words, He has complete power over my heart, though not over my spirit. While Vita's temperament and her affairs were stormy and passionate, Harold was an intellectual and more conventional. His son Nigel has said that Harold, quote, viewed sex as incidental and about as pleasurable as a quick visit to a picture gallery between trains. The story of Vita's marriage to Harold Nicholson is one of intrigue and bewilderment. In any case, their long marriage and partnership created Sissinghurst. Vita's poetic temperament and gardening expertise, combined with Harold's classically trained sense of architecture, form, and order, was to create one of the most celebrated gardens in England, and now one of the most visited as a National Trust property. So thus far, what I've given you is an overview, but now I want to unpick some of the fascinating details of Vita's life and family. So we're going to start at the beginning. Many of you will have read Portrait of a Marriage, which was published in 1973, written from Vita's own journals, which were only discovered after she died in 1962 by her son Nigel. And it's thought that she deliberately left the handwritten manuscript for him to find and digest. He later published her memoir and journal with his own remarks, and it caused an absolute sensation in 1973. In Portrait of a Marriage, their son Nigel combines his mother's memoir with his own explanations and what he learned from the manuscript, her own manuscript, and her many letters. There were thousands of them. Even during her various love affairs with women, Vita maintained a loving marriage with Harold. Portrait of a Marriage presents an often misunderstood but always fascinating couple. Vita was one of the most privileged young women of the Edwardian era, born in 1892 at Knowle House in West Kent, the iconic home of the Sackville West families, which is now a National Trust property. Knowle House was built in 1456 and originally belonged to the Archbishop of Canterbury at the time. Thomas Bourchier was his name. The house has been owned by the Sackville family from 1605 to the present day through 13 generations. Apparently, Knowle was so big that it is said to have a room for every day of the year. One scullery maid saw the dining room only twice in any 1 year because she just kept moving from room to room. Vita Sackville West always felt that she belonged at her lavish ancestral home. She was distraught that as a woman, she couldn't inherit what she already considered her own, and she remained bitter about this her entire life. She was a successful novelist, poet, and journalist, as well as a prolific letter writer and diarist. She published more than a dozen collections of poetry during her lifetime and 13 novels. When Vita was this age, she was probably best known for her garden column called, quote, In Your Garden, which appeared in the Observer newspaper from 1947 for 15 years until her death. In effect, she was the Una van de Spey of Britain. If you wonder where Vita's dark, brooding looks come from, her family history offers a riveting cast of characters. Her grandfather was Lionel Sackville West, the second Baron Sackville, a British diplomat who had 7 children with a Spanish dancer called Josefa de Oliva, known as Pepita, whom he never married. Technically, Pepita was already married, so all 7 children were illegitimate. Pepita was referred to as Countess West, though she never divorced her legal husband or married Lionel, the father of her children. Vita's mother, raised in a Parisian convent, was the illegitimate daughter of Lionel. Now, Pepita, who was very beautiful, was the daughter of a gypsy or a Roma washerwoman, probably from Marbella, who was also a dealer in old clothes and may have performed in a circus. This is a picture of Pepita, Vita's grandmother. Pepita's father was a barber who died in a street brawl when Pepita was 6. Her background couldn't have been more different to that of Lionel's, who had spotted her at the theater where she was performing, and then quickly established what was to be a lifelong relationship. Pepita died when she was only 40 after giving birth to her 7th child, a boy, who lived only 6 days. Now, this is Vita's mother, whose name was also Victoria. And she was the second illegitimate child of Pepita and Lionel. She was born in 1862, and she was only 9 years old when her own mother, Pepita, died. Lionel, her father, put her and her 2 sisters into a convent in Paris, and she saw him only 2 or 3 times a year. She remained in this convent until she was 17, when she was sent to another convent in England to learn English. Meanwhile, Lionel, now a widower, was appointed to the post, and this was his title: Envoy Extraordinary and Minister Plenipotentiary to the United States, a post he held until 1888. Now, this title is an early version of ambassador, which he was considered to be, and his hostess in Washington became his daughter, Victoria, who at age 19 apparently took Washington by storm. Lionel was forced to admit what had been gossip, that although he was a bachelor, he had 5 living illegitimate children, and that his intended hostess was one of them. A ladies' committee was quickly formed in Washington to discuss this very sensitive issue, headed by the then president's wife, Mrs. Andrew Garfield, and a decision was made that Victoria should be received cordially as her father's daughter. Early pioneers, those Americans. She captivated Washington from the start, and she was hailed as the reigning belle, beautiful, intelligent, and exotic. She soon developed a keen sense of efficiency and was a natural organizer and hostess, breaking hearts as she went along. She played tennis, rode horseback, shot rapids in a canoe, went fishing, hunted with Native Americans, visited many parts of the United States, and spent 2 months every winter in Canada. Don't know why she would want to do that. Her management skills obviously developed during this time, and in my opinion, all of this was superb training for becoming the chatelaine of Knowle House, the largest house in England in private hands. She chose from among her many suitors her first cousin, who was also named Lionel. Now the story gets a little confusing. Remember, there are 2 Victorias and 2 Lionels. She married him in 1890, and 2 years later, Vita was born at Knowle. Vita was to be an only child, and as for the first 10 years of their marriage, both of them were very much in love. And in Victoria's own words, quote, "He gave me 10 years of the most complete happiness and passionate love, which I reciprocated heartily. I adored him, and he adored me. But it was not to last." I'm just going to say one more thing about Vita's parents. Seen here with Vita on the left, in case you were thinking all this ancestry is a far cry from her glorious garden at Sissinghurst, please just notice the flowers, the hats, and the furs. Her family, anyone's family, leave an indelible imprint. And was it Vita's family pattern that was responsible for some of her quote unquote detours in her own married life? In time, Lionel and Victoria's physical separation eroded their relationship entirely. Both strayed from the marriage with other full-time partners who became extensions of the family. Quote, "The code was rigid," Vita later wrote in a novel about the Edwardian period. Within the closed circle of their own set, anybody might do as they pleased. but no scandal must leak out to the uninitiated. Appearances must be respected, though morals might be neglected. In 1906, Vita's mother, Lady Victoria Sackville West, began a relationship with Sir John Murray Scott, known as Siri. He was immensely wealthy, owning an apartment in Paris furnished with exquisite furniture, as well as Marie Antoinette's pavilion in the Bois de Boulogne and a hunting lodge in Scotland. He was a man of enormous proportions, and he adored Vita's mother, Victoria, and promised to leave his wealth to her to benefit Knowle House. When he died, his siblings contested the will, which had left a substantial portion of his wealth to Vita's mother, and there was a sensational court case, which Victoria won, but you can delve into that on your own. It's all fascinating, all this stuff. Vita's mother eventually left her husband Lionel, and she was tired of his many infidelities, and she moved to a house on the cliff top overlooking Brighton in Sussex. The house was called White Lodge, still stands today, and she had it remodeled by her close friend, Edwin Lutyens. The operative word here is close, with whom it was rumored that she had more than a business relationship. Lutyens was an English architect known for imaginatively adapting traditional architectural styles to the requirements of this era. And this is where Vita's mother spent the rest of her life, dying in 1936. The collapse of her parents' marriage was one factor which convinced Vita of her own duality, that her nature combined conflicting elements or sides, the English and the Spanish side, which both demanded satisfaction. She imagined those elements as opposites and therefore irreconcilable. Propriety pitched against protest, conformity against self, kindness against cruelty, a free spirit or a prisoner. When Vita died in 1962, it was the job of her son Nigel, then aged 45, to go through her things. Nigel, who died in 2004 at Sissinghurst, was a writer himself, as well as a broadcaster and a Tory or Conservative MP. As executor of her will, he had to sift through the hundreds of letters she had written, which were found in a large Italian cupboard in her tower at Sissinghurst. But as he took a final look around the sitting room, which he had only entered half a dozen times in 30 years, he noticed a locked Gladstone bag, a small portmanteau, which he had to physically cut open. Inside was a large notebook with page after page in neat penciled writing. There were some 80 pages, and it was an autobiography written when Vita was only 28 years old. So think how long that manuscript sat there untouched. It was a confession, an attempt to purge her mind and heart of a love that had possessed her, a love for another woman named Violet Trefusis. Portrait of a Marriage balanced a frank account of Nigel's bisexual parents and their extramarital affairs, especially Vita's elopement with Violet, and with Vita and Harold's enduring love for each other. It caused an uproar when it was published, and while many people had heard gossip and innuendo about the Nicholsons, the book was proof of their extraordinary lifestyle and Vita's love affair with Violet. Now, here is Violet as a young girl on the left, and as a mature young woman on the right in two different paintings. Now, let's put things into context. Vita and Harold married at Knowle in 1913 when Vita was 21. Harold would have been 27, and throughout their 18-month courtship, as I've said, they did not so much as kiss. Vita's parents were opposed to the marriage on the grounds that Harold was penniless and had an income of only £250 a year. When they were engaged early in 1912, each of them knew that they themselves were gay, but neither told the other. Homosexual acts were illegal, as I've said at the time, but their marriage was not an act of concealment or convention. They had quite simply fallen in love with each other. But Vita was no stranger to being in love. During her teenage years at Miss Wolfe's school, Vita inspired and partly reciprocated the love of two classmates, Rosamond Grosvenor and Violet Keppel. On the left is Vita in black, walking with Rosamond, who was her first major love interest. And the painting on the right is Violet, considered much more dangerous than Rosamond, and who replaced Rosamond in Vita's affections. So by the time Vita married Harold, she had already slept with both her bridesmaids. But, it was to be Violet with whom Vita had a long and deeply emotional relationship. Their schoolgirl attachment was both passionate and literary from the start. Both had creative aspirations from a young age and bonded over their love of books. It was this relationship that was to strain Vita and Harold's marriage to near breaking point. Violet was born in London in 1894, and she was the daughter of Alice Keppel, the longtime mistress of King Edward VII, sometimes known as Bertie, the son of Queen Victoria. The picture on the left is Alice, clearly a most beautiful woman. And on the right, Alice with her daughter Violet, who must have been about 4 or 5 when this picture was taken. Alice Keppel was one of the best society hostesses of the Edwardian era. Her beauty, charm, and discretion impressed London society and brought her to the attention of the future King Edward VII in 1898, when he was still the Prince of Wales, whose mistress she remained until his death in 1910. In history, deliciously repeating itself, Alice Keppel is the great-grandmother of Camilla, Duchess of Cornwall, the former mistress and now wife of Charles, the Prince of Wales, King Edward's great-great-grandson. Ladies, are you all still with me here? Everybody keeping up? Violet and Vita first met in London in 1905 at a tea party when Vita was 13 and tall for her age, ungainly, and quite unmannerly. And Violet was 2 years younger. Violet is on the left, looking a bit older than 11, and Vita is on the right, around the age of 12 or 13. After that, they both attended the same school for several years and soon recognized that they had a bond. Violet was always unique among Vita's friends, colorful and sophisticated. Her erratic friend, she said, as she introduced Violet to Harold, quote, "This brilliant, this extraordinary, this almost unearthly creature," as Vita described her at the height of their affair in 1920. At 27, Violet was brilliant, beautiful, and privileged beyond compare. Both her grandfathers had titles, an earl on one side and a baronet on the other. She had grown up in various grand homes with frequent foreign trips, spoke French and Italian fluently, and planned to be a novelist. Influenced by Oscar Wilde and Christina Rossetti, she was an aesthete whose god was beauty. Vita's relationship with Violet changed the course of her life. While Harold was the greatest love of her life, Violet was arguably her greatest passion. Theirs was a histrionic saga featuring thwarted elopements, sojourns in multiple European cities, floods of delirious love letters, not to mention cross-dressing, with Vita posing convincingly as a young man known as Julian. In Paris, with her head wrapped in a cocky bandage like a wounded soldier, Vita passed as a man. And it wasn't an unusual sight just at the end of the First World War. In April 1918, Violet and Vita refreshed and intensified their bond, and this is when their affair started in earnest. Vita had 2 sons by this time, but she left them in the care of others while she and Violet took a holiday in Cornwall. These 2 pictures show a devoted mother, Vita as a devoted mother, but the convention at the time was to have children brought up by nanny. In the photo on the left, Vida holds her first son, Ben, and on the left, Ben looks about 6. And Nigel, the youngest, looks about 4. They were actually 4 and 2 years old when Violet and their mother eloped to the continent in 1920 after several other excursions together. Meanwhile, Alice Keppel, Violet's mother, was busy arranging her daughter's marriage to Dennis Trefusis, who is often described as poor but handsome. Though monogamy wasn't prized by the Edwardian nobility, marriage was obligatory. Shortly after her 25th birthday, Violet was all but frog-marched down the aisle on June 16th, 1919. The groom, Dennis Trefusis, was a tall, blue-eyed war hero who, at least in the eyes of society, was a peerlessly desirable match. Violet liked him well enough, but wifedom held little allure, especially since she had no sexual interest in men. Poor Dennis had signed a pact with the devil. He apparently agreed to never have sex with Violet, which Violet had insisted on. She had made him agree to this as a condition of the marriage, and because she was not in love with him, but very much in love with Vida. The final attempted elopement was in February 1920, and at this time, the two husbands, Harold and Dennis, pursued the women, flying to France in a 2-seater airplane, which was considered extremely racy and dramatic at the time. There was certainly a lot of gossip about the two women in London, and it was beginning to be deeply concerning to not only the husbands, but to their mothers as well. The two couples had heated scenes in Amiens in France, and the climax came when Harold told Vida that Violet had been unfaithful to her with Dennis, which may not have been true, but Vida was much too angry and upset to listen. She then fled, saying she couldn't bear to see Violet for at least 2 months. Violet spent much of 1920 abroad, clinging desperately to Vida via continuous letters. In January of 1921, Vida and Violet made a final journey to France, where they spent 6 weeks together. And this time, Harold threatened to break off the marriage if Vida continued her escapades. When Vida returned to England in March, it was practically the end of the affair. Violet was sent to Italy, and from there she wrote her last desperate letters to Vida via an intermediary. At the end of the year, Violet had to face the facts and start to build life from scratch. Upon the death of King Edward VII in 1910, Violet's mother, Alice, and her obviously rather long-suffering father, George, moved to Florence, to Villa Ombrellino, having been effectively banished from the England court by Queen Alexandra, who herself had to put up with a great deal from her husband, Bertie. Later, this is where Violet lived after the collapse of her affair with Vida. And when her mother, Alice, died of cirrhosis of the liver, Violet continued living there, trying to maintain the beautiful gardens her mother had established. I tried in vain to find pictures of the gardens of Villa Lombrolino, but I wasn't able to. Violet had 2 heartfelt wishes: to be with Vida, for whom she declared, "I would commit any crime, sacrifice any other love." And she wanted to earn the world's respect as a woman of letters. Life would provide only a tantalizing and inadequate taste of both. The determined intervention of their embarrassed husbands and redoubtable mothers had prevailed. Yet the scandal overshadowed Trefusis's entire life and fixed her in the public imagination, quote, largely as a picturesque figure of scandal and camp tragicomedy. She was perceived as a tragic figure with a husband who would have nothing more to do with her, no children and no other close friends, while Vida had Harold, a mother who adored her, and her 2 boys. In my mind, the real hero of the tragic love story of Vida and Violet is Harold, who never faltered in his love for his tempestuous wife. Nicholson was himself by no means a stranger to affairs with men, but his forbearance and patience enabled the Nicholsons to continue their marriage. And Harold was no fool about what was going on. He chose tolerance and patience, but he did mind terribly. And I quote, "I know that when you fall into Violet's hands, your will becomes like a jellyfish addicted to cocaine," wrote Harold, who couldn't help wishing the manipulative Violet would simply drop dead. Much of what we know about their affair comes from Portrait of a Marriage, but Harold never thought of leaving Vida, only of showing her the way back. Slowly, she responded, but the ordeal lasted 3 years. In the end, Harold prevailed, although he never thought of it as winning. Vida chose her family in spite of Violet's incessant entreaties. Violet writes, "I am dead with grief. I am utterly alone. You cannot want me to suffer so. You had to choose between me and your family, and you have chosen them. I do not blame you, but you must not blame me if one day soon I seek for what escape I can find." And of course, what she was intimating was suicide, which did not happen. But what did Violet have to say about the affair? She wrote in her autobiography, Don't Look Round, and in it she says, marriage can be divided into two categories, those that begin well and end badly, and those that begin badly and end well. Mine came, she's talking about herself, roughly under the latter heading, begin badly and end well. It was not until a full year had elapsed that we, meaning her husband Dennis, were able to establish a modus vivendi. I hasten to add that, and she's still talking, I hasten to add that the fault was entirely mine. I was spoilt, egocentric, insensitive, odious. In time, Dennis and Violet came back to each other. We both loved poetry, France, travel. We were both Europeans in the fullest sense of the word, and the same things made us laugh. We quarreled a lot, loved not a little. We were more to be envied than pitied. They had no children, but they lived together in Paris until Dennis's early death from consumption in 1929. Violet and Vida did not meet again for 18 years, and when they did, another war brought them together. Violet never married, and she lived at Ombrellino until her death from a disease that made her starve to death because she couldn't absorb food. Yeah. So while Violet was the passion of Vida's life, she was by no means her only lover, and certainly not her most famous lover, who was in fact the writer Virginia Woolf, whom she met in December of 1922. Vida was then 30 and already a famous writer. Virginia was 40 and just beginning to get recognition for her novels and essays. Vida was an aristocrat and a socialite. Virginia was a shabby inhabitant of the Bloomsbury Group, an influential intellectual collective of radical artists, writers, and thinkers during the early 20th century. Born in London in 1882, Adeline Virginia Stephen, or Genia as she was affectionately known, had a love for arts and literature running through her family. Her sister, Vanessa, was an artist, and the two sisters became the heart of the Bloomsbury Group. In 1912, Virginia married Leonard Woolf, a politically active left-wing writer, despite not being attracted to him. There could be said to be a parallel between the Nicholsons and the Woolfs. Both marriages were alike in the freedom each spouse allowed the other, and in their love for each other, as well as the invincibility of the relationship based on an intellectual, spiritual, and non-physical base. Leonard, however, was not gay. Virginia was deeply cared for by Leonard, who was constantly on the watch for her mental declines. While Vida's friendship with Virginia was one of the most important aspects of Vida's life, there was no jealousy between the Woolfs and the Nicholsons because they had arrived independently at the same definition of trust. Vida and Virginia were to have a relationship that was more emotional than physical and that lasted until Virginia's death in 1941. Virginia saw Vida as the superior woman, while Vida saw Virginia as the superior writer. The love she felt for Virginia, Vida said, was not a sexual thing, but a mental thing, a spiritual thing, if you like, an intellectual thing. And she inspires a feeling of tenderness, Vida writes. But by 1941, Virginia had begun to drift into a strange state of serenity that quickly turned into the deepest of depressions. The strain of war, the fear of old age, and another period of insanity, as well as the terror of failing as a writer, all converged to produce for her the perfect storm. She had been plagued by mental illness throughout her life and attempted suicide twice before drowning herself by filling her overcoat pockets with stones and walking into the River Ouse on March 28th, 1941. She left a suicide note for Leonard saying, quote, "I don't think two people could have been much happier than we have been." Vita was to be haunted by her death for the rest of her life. By the way, this is not a painting of Virginia Woolf, but a painting by the pre-Raphaelite John Everett Millais, painted about 90 years before Virginia died. It's called Ophelia, but it seems to evoke the same kind of tragedy. The Nicholsons and Woolfs were also connected by Hogarth Press, started by the Woolfs in 1917 and which was to become Vita's publishing house. The Woolfs had no children, but their joint enterprise, the Hogarth Press, brought many important books into the world. Vita's novels, The Edwardians, published in 1930 by Hogarth, and All Passion Spent, published in 1931, were resounding successes and provided her with the money to purchase Sissinghurst Castle in Kent. Aha, ladies, we're finally coming back to the garden. The renovation of Sissinghurst would become Vita's lifelong project, and the garden, which would become more famous than her novels. Vita paid £12,375 for Sissinghurst. There was no running water, no electricity, and no heating. But the romantic ruins appealed to her. Sissinghurst was the battered relic of an Elizabethan house in which not a single room was habitable. The future garden was a rubbish dump, replete with mountains of old tins and other unexplained humps. Vita, who was viewing the property with son Nigel, looked around and said, "I think we'll be very happy here. I think we can make something rather lovely out of it." Harold and son Ben came the next day, and Harold recorded in his diary, "I am cold and calm, but I like it." Vita was the one who had the money to buy Sissinghurst in 1930, and so her audacious plan came to be. So not only did they create a massive garden from the rubbish dump, they had to repair every surviving building. This is the priest's house, which is available for rent through the National Trust, and which is a detached Elizabethan property sitting on the edge of Vita's white garden, which is shown on the right. And it is where sons Nigel and Ben lived when they were not at Eton or Balliol College, Oxford. Strongly influenced by the gardens created by Gertrude Jekyll and Edward Lutyens, their labor of love utilized their distinct talents. And let's not forget, Edward Lutyens was likely to have been Vita's mother's lover. Harold laid out the overall structure, including the hardscape, and insisted on following the plan, while Vita looked to the selection of the plant material with which to furnish the series of rooms that define the garden. Here she is with one of her beloved Alsatian dogs, wearing her go-to outfit, which was jodhpurs and boots. Vita, by the way, was 6 feet tall. They were operating on a tight budget and frequently clashed over the best use of resources on the multi-year project. So Vita and Harold were an example of terribly aristocratic, but not very well-heeled financially. Their financial constraints led them to open Sissinghurst to paying visitors in 1938. The Shillingses, as Vita called the guests, who were each charged a shilling for a tour of the garden. This is the main house, which is a long, narrow structure with relatively few rooms. One can see why it appealed to Vita, as the rooms here are also quite dark, with a similar feel to Knoll. Harold and Vita had separate bedrooms, and importantly, each person, including the 2 boys, had not only their own bedroom, but their own sitting room. There were no guest rooms, deliberately, and only one common sitting room. Vida and Harold achieved, by the accident of physical separation of the buildings, the perfect solution to their communal lives. Each of them could be alone for most of the day and unite for meals, which was clearly what the Nicholsons wanted. The garden at Sissinghurst is a portrait of their marriage, literally. Harold made the design and Vida did the planting. One can trace Harold's classical hand in the firm perspectives of the vistas, and in the careful siting of an urn or a statue, the division of the garden by hedges and walls into a series of rooms, and the calculated alternation between straight and curved lines. And as a contrast, Vida's romanticism can be seen in the overflowing clematis, figs, vines, and wisteria, and in the rejection of violet color or anything too tame or orderly, which is very like her. Wild flowers must be allowed to invade the garden, and if plants strayed over a path, they must not be cut back, making the visitor duck. Rhododendrons were banished in favor of their tenderer cousin, the azalea, and roses must not electrify, but seduce. Again, how like her. Sissinghurst is the 20th century garden that has had the most profound influence on English garden design. And there are a number of signature design features that are worth noting, and which so many British gardens, and I dare to say gardens here in South Africa, today have copied. First, the use of one color. Here, Rosa mulliganii grows on a framework designed by Sackville West's son, Nigel Nicholson. And of course, everyone remembers the White Garden. Vida published a garden column in January of 1950, and in it she shares her thoughts about a new garden that she is planning. Quote, "It's amusing to make a one-color garden. For my own part, I'm trying to make a gray, green, and white garden. This is an experiment that I ardently hope may be successful, though I doubt it. One's best ideas seldom play up in practice to one's expectations, especially in gardening, where everything looks so well on paper and in the catalogs." Here are two more pictures of the White Garden, just lovely, really. This signature design element has probably been the most prolific of all of her influences. And initially, she thought it would be a terrible failure. Vida loved her garden to overflow with plants. Quote, "It's cram, 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 every chink and cranny," she wrote on May 15th, 1955. And she did just that in the White Garden. Parts of it are separated into individual areas using lines of box hedging, but each area is filled to the brim with white flowers or overflowing with white and gray tinged foliage plants. Another signature design feature is the use of sculpture. Glimpsed through an archway or an open doorway, a well-placed sculpture draws the eye to distant reaches, making a garden feel larger and more mysterious. Another trick was using roses to cover the red brick walls. Loved for its roses, Sissinghurst attracts many visitors in June. This is the time to go and to rent that cottage for next year. Interestingly, the roses are trained in a very specific way here. If you visit the garden in March or April, when the structure of the roses is visible, you will see that each branch has been curved slightly and pinned into place. It makes a kind of cloud pattern. Creating this added stress to each branch is what produces an explosion of flowers. Incidentally, my first UCT summer school lecture on January 16th, 2023, will be the history of the rose and her many suitors. Unusual topiary can also be seen at Sissinghurst. Here's a bench made by pruning box hedging into the shape of a seat. As a member of Bloomsbury, which had love, art, and the pursuit of knowledge at its core, Vida's artistic character comes through not only in the plant combinations at Sissinghurst, but also in the playfulness of her topiary. My second UCT lecture on the 17th of January will be on the disfigurement and torture in the plant kingdom, topiary and bonsai. The Lime Walk is the only area of the garden at Sissinghurst that was both designed and planted by Harold. A long, narrow passageway. It is flanked on both sides by lime trees that are pleached. In other words, trained with their branches spread flat but elevated on their trunks. In spring, an abundance of spring bulbs emerge on either side of the path. It's an interesting way to link two gardens together while still providing an enclosed walkway. Sissinghurst has 10 distinct garden rooms created by using old existing walls or yew hedges. When you enter one of the garden rooms, your exit is suggested by drawing your eye to an interesting vista or sculpture in the next room. In this way, Vita and Harold kept your eye moving constantly on to the next thing. Now, this lovely tour of Sissinghurst will really let you enjoy the rooms, the vistas, the plants. And as you watch, just remember that Harold made the design and Vita did the planting. As you watch, just remember that Harold made the design and Vita did the planting. This amazing garden, started in 1930, is almost 100 years old today, and it was made by two people during their leisure time. And they created it during the intervals when they had enough money to do so. This garden was their extravagance. For both of them, it was an accompaniment to their many books, like the left hand on the piano to the right. Harold and Vita led, as you have realized by now, very separate lives. Harold spending the week in London, and when he returned each Friday to Sissinghurst on the train, he would look around the garden in his London suit, swinging his briefcase, and let his cares wash away. Vita, all alone, all week, would plan and toil, committing to vast notebooks her plans and goals. And when Harold returned on a Friday, she'd put to him all her ideas, her worries, her triumphs, her disappointments. You can almost hear her say, "Come, Harold, come look. What shall we do? What shall we plan? Look at what's happened during the week that you've been away." Her tower was a refuge, but Harold was the rock. How they must have loved this garden together every day, all the seasons, and wouldn't they be amazed to know that it's still so incredible? Vida died first in January of 1962 at the outset of the last of several winter cruises which they made together. She had an internal hemorrhage, but managed to conceal it from Harold throughout the voyage. On her return, she could do so no longer and underwent an operation which revealed advanced cancer. She barely survived the operation, but managed to return to Sissinghurst in late May, dying on June 2nd, 1962. Harold, according to his son Nigel, never recovered from Vida's death. He died in 1968 of a heart attack at Sissinghurst. And here they are in the sunset of their lives, Vida dressed for the garden, and Harold as though he'd just stepped off the train from London. Vida, as I have said, was a prolific garden writer, and at the end of her life, this is what she was the most famous for. And in her newspaper columns, she said many things that bear repeating, such as, successful gardening is not necessarily a question of wealth, as we so learned in Kailicha. It is a question of love, taste, and knowledge. If you love gardens, have a garden, love looking at gardens, I will leave you with these two thoughts. The one above is so true. The more one gardens, the more one learns. And the more one learns, the more one realizes how little one knows. The most noteworthy thing about gardeners, this is another one of her quotes, is that they are always optimistic, always enterprising, and never satisfied. They always look forward to doing something better than they have ever done before. So I'd like to say thank you for coming on this tour of Sissinghurst, as well as a biographical tour of Vida's life. And to all of you who have come to my garden tours around Cape Town, I so appreciate your enthusiasm and sense of adventure. For what is a lovely garden if you cannot share it with friends? My next garden tour is on the 27th of September, and it's an extraordinary, enchanted garden in a lush valley outside of Wellington, which belongs to two octogenarians. In fact, the Sunday supper is going to La Perla. Well, it's their garden, La Perla's garden. And the details are in the newsletter. So I would just like to say thank you to everyone. I appreciate it so much, and happy spring.
One last job for Margaret is to choose the winning ticket from our raffle this morning. We have a lovely cash prize for one lucky lady.
What is that? Pink
Blue,
ceramic?
is it green or blue?
It's
339 with a blue frame.
got a blue frame and a pink window. 339.
339. Have a look at your tickets. Yes, do we have a winner? Okay, thank you, ladies. Just a reminder, the bookstall is still open for a short while. The philanthropy desk would love to see you to sort your tickets. And now I declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much.